So you're obviously a very successful people, what people would deem as being very successful. So what how did spirituality sort of fit into that? Like what part of spirituality really sort of inspired you or became an integral part of getting where you are now?
Right. There are two parts of my faith that have helped me be successful, however success is so defined, but particularly in corporate America. That, you know, attributes of my faith, I should say. And one is knowing that things are going to get better. Because, frankly, you're going to have some bad days. And on occasion, you're going to have some bad weeks. And knowing that you can turn internally and know and believe that things are going to get better will get you through it. I'm often reminded of, you know, storms and how you just have to keep trudging your way through it. Because if you stop and the clouds aren't moving, then you sit in the middle of the storm. So I literally rely a lot on my faith when I'm having that bad day, that bad week, and on occasion, that bad month in your career. The other part of my faith that I draw upon is believing and wanting to believe that God controls it all. Too often, successful people believe that they actually are, you know, guiding this course and they're the captains of their own ship. And I spend a lot of time checking myself to say that the reason things are happening is not because necessarily what Johnny's doing. I'm a tool, but there is a God and there's some supreme power bigger than I who is a much bigger strategy, and I'm just a tool in that strategy. And that really helps you make it. You can't believe your own hype. You have to believe that you are where you are by design, and God's sort of managing it all.
So can you take us into a moment in particular where something was particularly troubling for you? Maybe before you really hit it big, or even during that period of time where you really needed to call upon, you know, some type of, or your own faith, I should say.
Actually, there are two. One that was in earlier on in my career.
Try to say this for me.
Okay. There were two times in my career when I really I was challenged and I had to draw on my faith to get through them. One much earlier on in my career, and the other, frankly, just recently when the decision was made to close Rushmore Drive. Going back in my career, I was really at a standstill. I didn't know, everyone was telling me, you know, you're a star, you're this, you're that, but I wasn't happy. I was making more money than I could ever imagine, than I'd ever imagined in my career. You know, I'm 26 years old, I have all sorts of fancy cars, and I'm making very high six-figure income, but I was unhappy in the job that I was in. And it wasn't giving me satisfaction, and essentially I was going into a mini depression. And I, you know, sought counseling and did all of that. Ultimately, the thing that got me through was stopping and really relying on my faith and saying, God, what would you have me do? And it wasn't what my mother wanted me to do. It wasn't what was going to pay the best. I ultimately had to ask, what is my purpose in life? What am I here for at this point in my life? That was early in my life, and when I sort of released myself and decided that Johnny couldn't make this decision, but that he had to open his mind for God to give me direction, it helped open up the pathway for my current success. Most recently, though, I was in the middle of, I ran a company called Rushmore Drive, and it was an IAC division. And I was fighting to make this business work. And I was constantly trying to figure out what is it that IAC wanted, what did I want, what did the market want. And ultimately, I was just confused. I literally was, you get to a point where everything is spinning, you know, literally in your life. And I took the time to say, God, what's the direction here? I'm going to sit, I'm going to be still. That's really the advice that I was given by a good friend of mine. And she said, be still and just let it all sink in, and the right answer will come to you. Ultimately, the decision was made. I resigned from the company, and the decision was made to close the company, and it was very difficult. And my natural fighter mentality wanted to, you know, resist it all, and I wanted to make this successful, and I wanted Barry Diller and IAC to want this company, and I wanted the buyer to take the terms that we wanted to sell it on. And I realized that this was all what Johnny wanted, and I wasn't relying on letting God make the decision and direct this ship.
So what tips, maybe 3 tips, would you give people who are going through spiritually troubling times related to unemployment? What could they do in particular to turn their life around?
Right. Unemployment is a horrific experience. The threat of it is scary, and then when it actually happens, one can be overwhelmed by the emotions. You're angry, you're sad, you feel helpless and hopeless. And so there are three things that I would advise people who are currently going through the unemployment experience to really consider, and it's drawing on your faith. First of all, let go and let God. I mean, literally, you can't get through this yourself, and the more you attempt to save yourself, the further deeply down into this hole you're going to fall. So the first piece of advice is literally just let go. God's going to get you through this, and it may be a specific purpose. There's a reason why you have these 3, 4, 6 months off and you can't appear to find a job. It's like, despite everything, the perfect resume, the perfect pedigree, the perfect everything, you're unable to get a job. Guess what? It may not be for you to work right now. God may want you to do something else right now. Focus on other parts of your personal life, your family life, your emotional well-being before you go back into the workplace. So that's number one. The second thing is, once you feel at peace, you now have to develop a strategy. Things don't just happen. There is a God who overall gives us direction, but we have to move. You have to get up off of that couch and really put a strategy in place. Think about what's important to you, your value systems, what you want to do in life, and then you have to act on it and really put together a job search strategy. And then finally, and this is where one has to rely on their faith, success is likely not going to come at the first door that you knock on, the first resume that you send, or the first couple of interviews that you visit that you are a participant in. Ultimately, it's keeping the faith, knowing that when it's supposed to happen, it's going to happen, and not at all succumbing to the feeling that I'm a failure because I didn't get that first job or that second job and no one wants me.
So what specific example do you have for people of faith? Maybe a personal story of a friend or two who went through something difficult, who was a person of faith, and maybe that you were able to help them.
Yes. I have a good friend right now, whose name I won't mention because she's such a good friend, but she's been unemployed now since November of last year, almost 9 months. Eminently qualified, wonderful 3 undergrad, graduate degrees, professional degrees. I mean, amazing pedigree, great work experiences, and she's going through this process unable to find a job. And she's called me in the middle of the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, depressed, not understanding why is this happening to me, what can I do? She's gone through a series of interviews, and that process of being interviewed and then rejected is quite an ugly process. And she's going through that. What I've done is literally said to her, first of all, you have to release, the saying of, relax, relate, release. And really, I know that's easier said than done when one has a mortgage to pay and you have all of the obligations, and frankly, your ego is tied up in not being employed because we spend our time employed, our adult lives employed. But I've said you gotta let go and let God. And then secondly, sometimes in this fear of trying to come out of it, you just take the shotgun approach. It's not a targeted search for your next career move. And so I've really spent the time talking with her about really doing some internal soul searching, introspective process to figure out what is it you want to do and how can we target a search that will position you to get that dream job.
So if I'm a person of faith, how can your book, The Trouble with HR, help me?
One of the things that I've always said to people of faith is you have to be prepared. And it's not enough to sit and say, God, just help me, help me. You have to take some of the responsibility in your life, and specifically with regard to your career. The book that I've written speaks to members of the faith-based community because it outlines what employers are looking for. Too often we go in and we don't understand the interview process. First of all, we don't understand that we are interviewing the interviewer as much as the interviewer is interviewing us. This is a process by which you have to decide. There's nothing worse than getting a job and realizing 2 months into it that this is not the right job for me. So, my book speaks to issues of culture, cultural fit, and not so much, again, the employer deciding if you fit into their culture. You have to decide if you fit into that culture and if this is the place you want to work. The book speaks to that issue. This book speaks to also determining whether or not the skill set that you have the skill set that you have is a skill set that's right for this particular job. If you are unemployed, you get desperate, I'll do anything. Well, you know, perhaps you shouldn't do anything, and this book speaks to you about that. Finally, what this book tries to do is outline some real helpful hints on how HR people think. What the HR professional, who is typically the gatekeeper and is going to decide whether or not you get to the hiring manager, how they think, what they're looking for in candidates. And so if you can go through the book, this is for the people who are currently unemployed or people who are underemployed. Unemployed, but I mean employed, but not in the jobs that they want to be, the highest and best use of their talent. It really gives them some inside tips into how to find that right role.